I don't need to tell you that Super Metroid is a phenomenal game that helped pioneer a genre of video games and still stands the test of time, because chances are, you already know this if you clicked on this video. However, as much as I recognize the legacy of Super Metroid, I still can't seem to put that on a higher pedestal over the first game how many others do. There's just something a little bit more special about it when it comes to the NES gen. So in this edition of Unpopular Opinion, I'm going to talk about why I personally believe that the first Metroid game is better than the beloved Super Metroid. If you've played a Metroid game before, you know that even before you get into the game, you're greeted by a big cinematic title screen and an intro, and this is at the very start. This helps the game feel more like a movie rather than a Friday night gaming session. It gets you more immersed into the bleak and eerie world you're about to enter. Super Metroid does a very good job at this with its title screen and intro and even tutorial-like mission when you first get into the game. However, I'd like to argue that the good old NEStroid does it a little bit better. And for those of you who haven't seen the Super Metroid intro, well, here's what it looks like. Yeah, that was cool and all, but here's Metroid 1's intro. Now, I know you might think that the NES's intro was rather more simplistic than the Super Nintendo game, but that might be all it needs. You see, in Super Metroid, it starts out switching between black screen and glimpse of the laboratory full of dead scientists with text on the black screens, and this creates a well implementation of a cinematic opening. And then you zoom out to see the dreaded lab with those lifeless scientists as the words Super Metroid face onto the screen. All while eerie sound effects and music play in the background. This is indeed a very iconic game title intro, but let's talk about the NEStroid's title screen intro. That was a lot of words. Anyway, right off the bat, the dark and eerie background of Zebes is shown to us with a trembling and somewhat uncanny bass line and set of notes playing in the background. Now right here, I would say that the NES game already won, but let me explain why. You see, in Super Metroid, the build-up to the title card is great and all, and the unsettling imagery during the build-up sets a great atmospheric tension of fear. But by the time the camera zooms out and the iconic title music starts playing when the words Super Metroid appear, I feel as if it's a little bit more quiet and a little anticlimactic. The notes that are played during the build-up feel a little more sinister and powerful than the actual melody of the title theme itself, which is kind of a turn-off. But of course, not a huge deal at all due to the fact that it doesn't take that much away from the atmosphere, and one may argue that the transition from scary to slightly more calm, in a sense, is a good way to present an uneasy yet triumphant mood. However, I feel that as soon as words are presented to our visual perception, as well as the main music that is accompanied, it almost creates a chemical reaction in my brain that's almost like a dopamine rush of a feeling of, oh hell yeah, we're not fucking around. And personally, I feel the climax of your powerful music should be presented to you as soon as possible, as soon as the title appears, because it just adds that feeling of, you know what you're getting into, and you know damn well what this is all about. And the more upfront it is, the more effective it is. With that being said, let's take a look at the original game for a second. As soon as you get into the game, boom, powerful, dark and catchy music is presented to you, and takes no time to do so, which I really appreciate and is the reason I believe it's already better than its successor on the SNES. Then, the lower first note of the melody is played. Still a bleak and dark planet is shown, while the dreadful bass line still plays alongside the imagery of a bleak, dark, and just straight up terrifying world. And then the first note right here really adds a truly isolated and hopeless feel. Then the word Metroid appears as a higher note is played. The bass line and simple melody still play. However, I also feel that this specific note right here that is played when the title appears is literally perfect for this moment. This note in particular screams something is happening, pay attention. From the beginning it's low and then boom, words pop up, surprise. The high note gives a more cinematic and lively feel to the word appearing, and this simple thing right here immersed you even more than before. While Super Metroid almost becomes less lively when the calmer title theme plays when the title card appears, I don't get the same chemical reaction as I would with the lively, almost surprise note of Metroid 1's title card appearing, while a more lively feel of a sound is presented, all by one single note. A little bit later during the intro, the same high-pitched note is played, and the game title flashes colorfully. Once again complementing that feeling of something's happening and action has occurred. The colorful flashes also help accommodate the bright, high-pitched note that almost elevates the mood to a feeling less tense. However, a few seconds later, the screen flashes and text appears, saying, "Emergency order." This is a game briefing your mission. The silent text, black background, and unsettling music still playing, with nothing flashy occurring, puts you back in that shit just got real sort of attitude. Alongside the enormous task that is being presented to you, only adds to the pressure and responsibility you now have to deal with. Combine this with dark, bleak background and trembling music, you now feel tense and uncertain of the future ahead, even before you've played the game. Then the text fades, and a more melodic melody is played. This shows you that things may look grim, you still have hope for your journey though. The mood once again becomes a little less tense, but now it is completely melodic and soothing. Then you get lost in the calming and soothing music. There's already been a roller coaster of emotions, and the game hasn't even started yet. It's almost like you've already played a 30-second version of the game and then reflected on how you made it feel. Or how it made you feel. The same animation of the title screen occurs, but now with the softer music playing in the background. This word goes from a feeling of hopelessness to hope. As the mission text appears again and a different melody playing, your perspective of feeling the pressure from the heavy task makes you feel more hopeful and confident for the obstacles you will face ahead. The title card and text appears a couple more times, and at this point it's like you're playing a different game almost. But out of nowhere, during the mission debriefing, the broody music plays again, reminding you that this still isn't a joke and should be taken with heavy precaution. It's because of these things I feel Metroid 1 did it better introducing itself than its successor. I also feel that chiptunes do a better job of creating a more loud and powerful atmosphere than the sound font of the SNES. Just my personal opinion. Also, a few games on the SNES in my opinion do this better than the NES, but let's talk about the next phase of Super Metroid's intro. It's only fair, right? So, let me show you what the, I guess, actual intro, aside from the title screen, looks like.
The last Metroid is in captivity. The galaxy is at peace.
I still feel that Super Metroid is doing a good job with this, but there are two issues I have with this. Number one, when Samus is talking about her prior events up until now, we can see a little bit of her face. This takes a little bit of the mystery away from what's under the suit. Metroid embraces mystery, so why is taking away some of that by revealing a little bit of what's underneath Samus' helmet? Why is it doing that? Another thing, the music feels a little too triumphant at times. After all, this is a Metroid game, so what's with all the triumph already? We haven't even played the game yet. These issues may not seem like much, but they are taking a little bit away from the dark and intimidating atmosphere. So, in conclusion, I feel that Metroid 1 had the better intro. But why do I care about intros so much? Well, they set the mood and tone for what you're about to get into, and can either turn you off, or really immerse you into what you're about to get into. In most 2D Metroid games, you'll start off in an elevator while triumphant music plays at the start. However, in Super Metroid it's a little different. At the start, you'll enter this lab that you saw in the beginning to search it after it's been under attack. The first thing you do is drop from a ceiling door, and that's that. You then traverse through a quiet hallway with menacing music playing in the background. And then you find the Metroid from the previous game in a container, which is suddenly snatched from Ridley, who then must briefly fight until he flies away with the Metroid in his clutches. After this, you must escape the lab in a small amount of time before it explodes. Doing so, you then fly to the planet Zebes, once again to try to stop the evil Ridley and Mother Brain. When you land on Zebes, you are welcomed by a sinister melody and bleak world, the classic Metroid greeting, while thunder and lightning flash and roar in the background. Then it's on your own. It's time to explore. While this is a great introduction of what you're about to embark on, I'd argue that Metroid 1 did this a bit better in just 5 seconds. You see, as soon as you hit start, you are greeted to the lonely and dark world of Brinstar, only accompanied by the nasty, creepy crawlers and the bugs that lurk within the caves and tunnels of this bizarre place. During the first couple of seconds, you are greeted to a triumphant fanfare while Samus slowly emerges from the darkness standing on an elevator. While I said earlier that triumph is not the essential core to Metroid games, this is an exception. While the intro took you on a roller coaster of emotions, it set you up to be expecting 3 core things: isolation, fear, and ironically, triumph. Yes, there is triumph, but that's only if you keep pushing through the journey throughout Zebes, and you will eventually be rewarded for your hard work. The last thing you'd expect when getting into the game at the start is the last theme, which is triumph. This catches you completely off guard, and you can appreciate the hopeful feeling going into the game. I mean, after all, who wants to be completely hopeless before taking on a giant labyrinth such as this? I mean, I know it's Metroid, but still. Also, the fact that the beginning build-up of the fanfare while Samus slowly fades from the darkness is present is more badass than just, oh look, I fell from a ceiling into this lab, or oh, I just popped out of my ship. There's not as much of a cinematic feel when that happens as it would if your character slowly emerges into a ready stance while kick-ass music plays. After the fanfare, you are then caught up by yet again another surprise, by that triumphant theme of Brinstar. Maybe this journey won't be so hopeless after all. It's a great way to show you that even though this may be tense, you can still come out victorious. It's the little things like this that make Metroid 1 stand out from Super Metroid, and yes, I also do believe that the start of the game can make your experience better or worse. And in this case, Metroid 1 did it the best. A lot of people have a problem with this particular aspect in Metroid 1, that it doesn't have a map and where you are you can get lost very easily. Well, I'd like to argue that a lack of a map makes the game all the better. You see, Samus is a bounty hunter who has a price on the heads from very dangerous monsters and intergalactic beings. She isn't given handouts and hints on where to go. She must figure it out herself like any bounty hunter would. Sure, they might be given the last seen location of whoever they're hunting and the threat level of their target, but that's really about it. Do you really think that Zam Wessel was given a map layout of Coruscant? No. You deal with your surroundings yourself. It's more authentic that way. You were put into this labyrinth. Now you gotta explore it, and that's the point. If you were given a map of everything around you, the exploration feels a little less authentic, and authenticity plays a big part in the Metroid games. A more authentic bounty hunter takes notes of where they are as they go along. They aren't given maps of an entire planet or area. Sure, in Super Metroid, you have to find maps within areas to get a complete map of where you are. But still, even before and after that, wherever you went was tracked by a pink streak on the map holder, so to say. I'm not really sure what to call the box that holds your map in the top right corner, but you get what I'm saying. Even if you pause the game in Super Metroid, you get a map layout. Unlike in the original game, there's no indication of where you are at all. It makes the experience feel more adventurous, and you feel a lot more immersed. And who's to say that you can't grab a piece of the paper and draw a map of where you are yourself? I would also like to argue that creating your own map and finding items and bosses on your own feels way more rewarding than just looking at your in-game map of the exact layout you're in and being like, okay, I guess I have to go here. Because at that point, it just feels way more tedious because all you want to do is get from point A to point B. But point B could be so far away. Whereas in Metroid 1, you never know what to expect going into the next room. So you always have to be on your toes and it keeps you on edge. I'm not saying that in-game maps automatically make the feeling of exploration pointless. It just feels less authentic and more just keep trucking on until you get into here. It just makes the experience feel more tedious than it already could be. When you are forced to make a map on your own and keep notes on your own, it feels way more rewarding and you feel more accomplished because you found that special item. You found out where the bad guys are and are hiding, and ultimately you yourself tracked down the final villain who has started this whole mess to begin with. An in-game map didn't guide you. You guided yourself like a real bounty hunter. Obviously, this is just a game of pure fiction and Samus Aran is not a real person, but it still makes you feel like a true hero, who you yourself, without anyone else, outsmarted the bad guy, and you with your own wit alone found out everything, and you did it all with your wit and exploration. Almost like a detective who just cracked a huge case, and the reward is pretty damn awesome. While I can appreciate the help of an in-game map of exact layouts of areas like in Super Metroid, and I genuinely do sometimes prefer this when I get stuck rather than just dying just to respawn back to the elevator, just to have the half of the health I regained, at the end of the day, I still prefer the NEStroid's take on this giant labyrinth. This may be the most important argument in this video aside from the music of these games themselves. Metroid is all about the atmosphere of which you are playing in. Without this aspect, Metroid would not be the same beloved series that it has become. If all else fails, the atmosphere may be the only thing saving these games. So let's start with Super Metroid. In Super Metroid, it keeps that classic on your toes and on the edge of your seat environment that the games are known for. However, I feel that sometimes the game isn't as intimidating as it could be. For example, the rooms and areas compared to Metroid 1 aren't as dark or as menacing and straight up aren't as bleak as it could be. The environments in the game feel a little too vibrant or colorful to me. The jungles of Brinstar are too vibrant. Meridia is just straight up not threatening to look at all sometimes. It just feels like a glorified sandcastle. Norfair in some areas is barely even like the hellish landscape it's known for, and the overall music in the game isn't as menacing as it could be sometimes. When I go back to Criteria, I feel like I'm in the middle of a school marching band because of the music I hear, when I should be reminded that this is a desperate and lonely world. The jungles of Brinstar just straight up make me want to dance. Look at me, I'm fucking dancing, fucking moonwalking. And come on, seriously, what's with the overtop triumphant music that plays during the mission debriefing? What, did my dad come back? It's just that sometimes the game feels a little more poppy and lighthearted than it should be sometimes. Don't get me wrong, the game still feels like classic Metroid when you fight bosses, get to the right ship, or finally make your way to defeat Mother Brain and Tourian. But like I said, it just feels not as threatening as it should be sometimes. Still a fantastic atmosphere overall. Now let's talk about Metroid 1's atmosphere. From start to finish up until the end, it is constant dread and misery. Every background wall is pitch black, which adds to the darkness and liminal space feel that puts you on edge. That's pretty much what this game is. 8-bit liminal spaces. Almost every track in the game feels intimidating and eerie. Some music in the game is just straight up hard to listen to, and a couple of notes are just over and over again to repeat, but we'll get into that later on. Not a moment in the game do I feel like I'm safe or not in the risk of getting blasted or hit by an enemy. Every moment your heart is pumping as you carefully make your way through this hellish and ominous godforsaken planet. Right before you enter a boss's room, an orchestra from 8-bit hell almost jump scares you. And when you defeat a boss, it really feels like you just killed an alien or some evil organism, like it's some serious shit. Not to say Super Metroid doesn't. I would say more intimidating bosses are present in that game, but just the overall atmosphere, mood, and awkwardness just adds to the game's suspense. And that's another thing, this game feels like something's off almost. It's a true psychologically unnerving vibe that can't be done justice just by explaining, and it's something you have to experience for yourself. Even Samus, the main character, moves very weird and awkward, It's very genius actually, because she's the main focal point of the game and she's the thing you look at the most, and the fact that she's moving very strange just feels a little uncanny and adds to the horror in a way. Another thing is that it shows that just because you're the good guy, or woman in this case, you still are just a tiny, somewhat unprepared being compared to the overall danger and unknown mystery awaiting you, shown by the awkwardness of your movement. You may be the heroine of this story, but you're not perfect. It's not just Samus that moves awkwardly. Everything moves awkward, it just doesn't look right. The uncanny awkwardness of the game really elevates this dark and grim atmosphere that the game is trying to present. Another crucial thing that adds to this intimidation of the game is the level of difficulty you're faced with, aside from not just getting lost in the giant world. The platforming is extremely challenging and sometimes almost impossible to accomplish getting through. Each room feels like a gauntlet just getting through. Getting past just the first couple of pathways and areas will take some time getting used to, and you'll actually need to put a little bit of effort into it. This game is not an easy game at all, and that's not to say that Super Metroid is a walk in the park, but compared to the original, it's almost child's play. You will constantly be optimizing your strategies in order to save your precious energy tanks from reaching zero. This game genuinely does make you feel like you're in an alien movie or classic sci-fi horror movie, and does a better job of creating this intense and dreadful atmosphere better than Super Metroid does in my opinion. Now let's get on to the music. Metroid soundtracks are another very important staple in the games and help them set the atmosphere and mood. Both Metroid and Super Metroid have great soundtracks, but I feel that Metroid 1 has not necessarily a better soundtrack just because it sounds better in my opinion, but it also fits the mood better and creates a more intense atmosphere. Like I stated before, Metroid is not a very lighthearted series, and Super Metroid feels too poppy at times, and I honestly feel that there aren't too many standout tracks in that game. Sometimes the tracks in Super Metroid sound the same and almost a little boring and just become noises you're adjusted to as you spend time searching through the areas of Zebes. Not to say it's bad, just sort of average, too similar, or not trying to take many risks at times and just be different. Standout tracks for me in Super Metroid are Brinstar, the Jungle Floor, and the Tourian theme. Even the jungle theme itself stands out, not because of the intensity, it's not even an ominous theme. It's just a break from the same notes and same sounding melodies I've been accustomed to. But the Tourian theme is genuinely unsettling, and I'd say it's one time that it does a better job than Metroid 1 of setting a dark and hellish mood. In my opinion, the Super Metroid OST is extremely overrated, and honestly it's kind of boring to hear aside from 2 tracks. On the other hand, Metroid 1 has a better soundtrack in my opinion, because it knew what it wanted to be and it didn't stray too far away from what it was ultimately. The soundtrack in Metroid has one main theme: dread and isolation. Almost every track is menacing and dark, and even when it's not, it still fits whatever situation you are in. For example, Brinstar is triumphant because it's the beginning of the game before you are exposed to the bizarre world that is Zebes. Norfair is a bit less triumphant and a bit more ominous, while still being borderline triumphant due to the fact that you've been exposed to what works in Zebes from what you've experienced so far. But it's still the beginning of the quest, and you still have hope. Kraid's Lair feels like you just kicked someone's ass. You have finally found one of the deadly fugitives, and you've had enough. Ridley's hideout feels straight up terrifying due to the power you've just experienced fighting Kraid. You've been reminded that you've infiltrated the planet of the galaxy's most dangerous creatures, and they're not afraid to fight back. The item rooms sound mysterious yet provoking. What works there? Should I be cautious? And finally, all hell breaks loose in Tourian. The Hellish Symphony lets you know that this is it. No turning back. You've gotten yourself into this mess, and there's no turning back now. Well, technically you can go back to Brinstar if you want to grind a little bit more, but that's besides the point. Sure, the boss fight music was unpleasant before, but now that you've entered Mother Brain's Lair, this is the worst that's yet to come. It's actually scary. And then just when you thought you've had enough, the game throws a curveball at you, and now you have to escape before the planet explodes. Great, just when I thought I had a break. Music now is still frantic, but at the same time melodic, reminding you that you are almost there. Just keep going, keep pushing, no turning back. And then when you finally reach the surface and escape the planet, you are accompanied by a relaxing and joyous tune, which lets you reflect on this massive journey, and then finally you realize, Samus has tits. All in all, the soundtrack of the first game feels more fitting and eerie, while Super Metroid almost feels like copy and paste and not the right music for the right moment. At least that's how I interpret it. Both soundtracks are great, but I feel that Metroid 1 had the best one and the most fitting of the 2. In the end, both games are great, but these are just some of the reasons I personally believe that Metroid 1 is better than Super Metroid. I could talk about this topic all day, but unfortunately I can't, although I can certainly play these games all day if I really wanted to. But who knows, maybe my opinion might change, but as of right now, my take still stands that I believe that sometimes you just can't beat the original. So with that being said, this is Gamer Tyler, and have a blessed day.